Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Hogan, your host at Leadership Collective for the next 2 days. We're so excited you're here. My job as head of insights at Figma is to curate industry trends, thought leadership, and just bring you all really interesting content. I've had a big hand in the content that's been created and will be presented over the next few days, and really hope you enjoy it. And with that, I want to welcome Shant Voskanian and Sheila Bashi to the stage.
Sheila, be here.
Bless you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Shant. I am Chief Revenue Officer at Figma, which is really just a fancy way of saying I'm in sales.
And I'm Sheila. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer, and I don't have to make up my title. You know what I do.
It's true. It's true.
But I have to start with, wow, that keynote, huh? Pretty amazing. I was inspired. And Dylan's Now with AI t-shirt, I want to get one of those.
Do you think it would look good under this blazer?
I don't know, it's a little bit of a tech meme if you do that. But we definitely need to get those in the swag store. I don't know if you all have visited the swag store downstairs, but it's a little bit of a thing at Figma. So highly, highly recommend you stop by.
Cool. Well, look, we are thrilled to have you here with us today. For those of you that did join us last year, you might recall that this space, which we are now calling the Leadership Collective, is really a place for leaders in the Figma community to get together, share ideas, best practices with each other, but also hear a little bit from us in terms of what we are thinking about at Figma as we think about the trends in the market and what we want to build for you all in the future.
And number one, thank you all for being here. And number two, we have been thrilled and maybe a little bit overwhelmed by the demand from you all for the Leadership Collective. As many of you know, the Leadership Collective is not just something that exists today and tomorrow at Config itself, but it's been events all week where we've been able to spend time with you on boat trips, at baseball games, doing wine tasting, and just getting a chance to hear the best practices, the insights, the ideas that you all share with us. It's some of our favorite parts of doing Config every year. So thank you for that. And if you want to join some of these Leadership Collective events from now and over the next year until the next Config, we have a lot of stuff planned, and we're going to bring it to you in the cities where you are. So talk to your account executive, and they'll make sure that you're in the know on when they're going to happen.
I didn't get to go on any boat trips, but maybe you can get me in there.
I don't know, Shant. You got to know the right people to be able to do that. So.
Yeah. Well, look, part of the reason we love this so much is we get to really hear from all of you about what is top of mind and what is most important. And this year, we've heard from you very loud and very clear. One, you're all on a mission to ship with higher quality and speed. And two, you want to spend more time innovating and problem solving and less time on repetitive tasks. At the same time, many of you are being asked to do more with less. Less time, fewer people in some cases, and that represents a real collision of things. Enter AI. If you were in the keynote a few minutes ago, you heard that certainly we at Figma are excited and embracing AI. And it really does feel like AI was built for this moment and the challenges that many of us are facing in our industry today. But the reality is, AI is just a part of the story. The future of work is not going to just be about how humans are going to interact with artificial intelligence, but also with each other. Every day we are seeing more and more companies embrace the power of collaboration to break down silos and reimagine how they are bringing concepts into reality. But it's only the beginning. The future of work is now, And people are looking to the folks in this room for inspiration and direction on the impact of this paradigm shift and what it means for them.
And I have to say, it's amazing to have a collection of leaders like this in one place. It brings almost kind of goosebumps to think about how the future of so many industries starts with the people in this room. So the people that we have joining us today in the Leadership Collective are going to speak to some of the trends that Shant mentioned. And they'll share their experiences at the best companies and how they're navigating a lot of these shifts in what's happening in the market. The first day of the Leadership Collective today is going to be all about inspiration, vision, and talking about this moment that we're in. And on day 2, we're going to dive into new approaches and hear from leaders on how they're handling the transformation that's in progress. So we've got amazing speakers from places like Combank, the largest bank in Australia, GitHub, a leader in AI. You'll hear from design leaders at CNN, Target, and Warner Music about the mindsets they're adopting. And speakers from Figma are going to take you a little bit behind the scenes so you can hear about the way that we think. And I'm thrilled to say that Kevin Systrom is our first speaker today. You might have heard of him, I don't know. He was a leader during the mobile era as the co-founder of Instagram. And he's most recently been innovating at the edge of AI with Artifact, which is a personalized news app. So he's here to tell us what he's learned from those experiences. And interviewing him is Ellen McGirt, editor-in-chief of the Design Observer. So please join me in welcoming Kevin and Ellen to the stage. Whoa, caught myself.
We're going to do the standing.
I know. We're going to do an interpretive dance.
Yes. Thank you.
It's so good to be here. I watched this conference last year, and it's amazing to be here in person. So thank you so much for having us. And Kevin, thank you so much for driving over.
Of course. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Before we dig in, I have a long list of things that we put together a whole design brief for talk to you about. We can talk about anything that you want to talk about. But before we dig into what Artifact is and was and what you wanted it to be, let's talk about where it is now.
Sure.
Because I'm not sure everyone knows.
Yeah, so we started Artifact, oh gosh, might have been 3 years ago at this point. And like all good startups, we were in stealth for far too long. And we launched probably a year and a half ago, and over that year, tried to build what would become a great way to consume news and information on the internet using artificial intelligence for personalization. So another way of saying this is, imagine it's a TikTok for text. And the idea is that as you tap on articles and as you read things, it learns what you might be interested in. So if you are interested in Japanese architecture, Mexican cooking, if you are a new parent, if you're a huge fan of a particular sports team or player, it would learn those things, and then it would create a feed that was tailored to you. And over that year, we learned that there is a very small group of people who like to read a lot, but not a very large group of people that like to read a lot. So about, 4 or 5 months ago, we announced that we were going to shut down operations because, if you're going to work on something, it should be a really big problem with a very large audience and potential market. And out of nowhere, a bunch of people reached out and said, whoa, don't shut it down. Like, we actually love it. Can we take this technology and plug it into this thing we're doing? And of all those people, what ended up happening was Yahoo News, which is one of the largest not news organizations, but news aggregators in the world, decided that they wanted to take the technology we had built and plug it into Yahoo News. So now it powers, at least right now, the Yahoo News mobile app, which was relaunched, I think, a week or two ago. So we're very proud to see that technology live on. But yeah, so that's what Artifact is/was.
Okay.
But it lives on, which makes, as an entrepreneur, I'm super happy about that.
I would be too. But it's interesting. What problem were you trying to solve? Because you took your time. I know that you said that you were in a beta a little too long, but you were really looking for something. What were you trying to solve, particularly around news and discovery?
And I think as context, one of the reasons you're asking about the problem to solve is because this is like my mantra.
Yes.
It actually, like, it was amazing. I was sitting at a dinner maybe a couple weeks ago, and I was just spouting off ideas that I might go work on. And the CEO next to me looks at me dead in the eye and was like, well, Kevin, what problem are you trying to solve? And I was like, thank you. At least this is getting out there as like, this is the thing you should be asking. Because so many people are like, let's just layer on AI onto everything we're doing. Let's just, put a fun little button somewhere and hope it all works. That, like, how many products do you use where, I don't know, a year ago, everyone just put buttons everywhere and it writes everything for you and everything. Now that can be cool, but you have to ask, what problem are you trying to solve? Are you trying to make writing easier? Are you trying to make designing easier? If you can crisply state what problem you're solving for the consumer, then things typically go well. I once saw a talk by Jeff Bezos where he said the best thing about consumers is that they're constantly dissatisfied, constantly. Like, you can never make them happy, which means that you've got an unlimited amount of time and upside to build products that make people very, very happy, or at least less unhappy. And if you search for the problems that those people have on a daily basis, and you execute very specific solutions to those problems, then things go well. In Artifact's case, the problem we were trying to solve, well, there were a few. One was I wanted to read, and every single news aggregator that I opened, I'm not going to start naming names, sucked. And you're laughing because you know it's true. You open them up and you're, I don't know, from the Pacific Northwest, and you're seeing the Orlando Sentinel about some baseball team you don't know, and then some bad story about AI from some blog you don't know. We used to make a joke that there was, oh no, I can't make fun of them. But there were these random blogs in other countries that would write stories about emerging technology, and you'd be like, okay, like, I generally agree that we should be covering this, but I don't want to read it from so-and-so who doesn't really know about this topic.
Right, right.
I want someone who's an expert. So what we tried to do was build a better version of that. Don't call it a better mousetrap. And the idea was that we could create this personalization that really knew you because AI had come so far. And like I said, it turns out you can build a product that solves that problem very well, but if not a lot of people have that problem,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like, I was focused so much of my career on solving a problem, but I think you also need to multiply it by how many people deeply have that problem every day. And I think it's just very difficult to compete in the world of video where most of us pull out our phone and just want to relax for 10 minutes by watching some TikToks or something.
So I saw in an earlier interview that you embraced the jobs to be done framework for how to design, how to measure or manage or just think about what consumers actually need. Before you got to Artifact, and I want to go back in time and get a little more in your bio and then talk about Instagram as well. And I loved that when I learned that, the Clay Christensen folks, the team at Harvard, when you start thinking about the world, the green field of the world and what you wanted to solve, like how do you think about what job people need and what job technology can do? Just sort of it's more of a philosopher king kind of question there. Your bigger framework, your bigger orientation as you look at the world.
Maybe, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this directly or well enough, so feel free to re-ask. But I think one of the takeaways from my time at Artifact and Instagram is that I think if you're going to create, not that this is everyone's bar, but like a multi-billion-dollar thing that changes the world that everyone uses, it's almost a law of nature that you have to be personally passionate about that thing. I studied abroad in Italy for, I don't know, 4 months in college. And I decided to drop all my computer science and math and all that stuff. And I took a class in photography. And I spent way too much time in a very dark room in Florence, Italy, developing black and white photographs instead of being out like looking at Florence, Italy, which is ironic. But in that dark room, my photography teacher, Charlie, and I still remember Charlie because he had this huge head of curly hair and just he was wacky and he was like, take pictures of things and do this thing and do this thing. He handed me this bottle of chemicals and he said, now throw that in the developing bath. And I was like, what is this going to do? And he's like, well, it's going to change the colors of your photos. And they were black and white, but it would tint them and it would morph the tones of the photographs. I forgot about that for so long, but I loved photography. And when we were starting Instagram, the reason I had the insight to work on filters early was because I sat in that darkroom for those many hours and cared deeply about it. And I can't tell you the last time I woke up on my own and just read end-to-end the New York Times. Or spent a bunch of time just like reading blogs or like I cared about it. I thought it was a problem, but it wasn't the thing I woke up every single day trying to do myself.
Yeah.
So I think if you're going to spot a problem,
Yeah.
a job to be done, the way you know you're going to have a solution to it that is going to be so great is if you've lived deeply with that problem yourself
Yeah.
for quite some time.
The thing that I thought was very poignant and very meaningful about the fact that you chose news and information, which is the industry that I chose from the second half of my life, is that the world needs good information. That's the problem. We need better information about vaccines. We need better information about what's actually happening in the weather. We need to know what's happening in Somalia. That was the sort of the poignant moment was, okay, Kevin and Mike are on the job here. We're going to get access to that kind of expertise. But that takes a kind of massive social understanding, what drives people to want good information, not just information that reinforces something they decided to think about the world. How do you think about, like now I'm asking you to solve like a Nobel Prize level problem. How did you're studying all these, you're studying people, you're an invite and now you're letting the public in, you're studying how people consume information and you're thinking about the world. How do you think about those kinds of massive level problems?
Well, first I'll say,
because I know you think about it.
well, I want to say something different, which is like,
Okay.
I think just because you have on your resume that you've worked somewhere great doesn't make you a great candidate to solve like some amazing problem in the world. And no, I mean this like,
That's
I guess.
really important.
But think about how many amazing problems have been solved by like kids in a garage. Almost assuredly, the person that solves news consumption of information probably like doesn't get paid very much right now, is like probably going, maybe just a new grad, probably just like looks at news and information in a very different way than any of us who have just been baked in this for 20 some odd years. And that's humbling and that keeps you fresh. I think it's a mistake if you're a big company to just hire people with brand names because you think they're going to unlock something. Instead, you find people within who just have fresh ideas. And I realize this isn't exactly the question that you were.
This is perfect.
But I don't know. Like, experience both helps in that it gives you perspective to navigate reoccurring problems in business. And it also hurts in that you take those frameworks and you apply them to every new problem that it shouldn't be applied to. So I think as an entrepreneur, my job and my life right now is to say, what stuff have I learned in the past that should be reapplied over and over again? And what stuff am I just like woefully out of date and I need to get fresh on? How many people here listen to dubstep? Okay, we've got like 6 hands. But do you guys remember, like, I should ask, how many people know what dubstep is? Okay, good. When dubstep first came out, like, I love music. I love electronic music. I remember listening to it and be like, what the hell is this song? Like, what is this sound? That's how you know something's going to be disruptive. That's how you know that the world is changing under your feet and you need to get fresh with something, is when you have that feeling. And now Skrillex plays a show in San Francisco, and I don't even know how many people showed up. It was like 50,000 people or something. No one goes out past 8 p.m. in San Francisco, and there were 50,000 people, in the Civic Center. So my point is, it's important to realize what in your past helps you be great at the future, but try to sand those edges down that feel like they're going to keep you in a box and keep you from seeing things with fresh eyes. Because the kids the people that end up solving these large problems are often kids without any of that, cruft that keeps them from seeing new solutions.
Speaking of kids, I learned from your hometown paper at Holliston, Massachusetts, that you were always into computers.
I was.
Almost like a human version of Artifact. Your friend Will Jonathan said he would always show me these cool things I had no idea about.
Will Jonathan. I haven't heard that name in 30 years.
The best thing about the big news of you selling Instagram was all the folks from your hometown that were quoted in the piece about you. It was really very sweet.
I need to read this.
It was really wonderful. He was your friend in 8th grade computer class, and you were a cross-country rookie of the year. Your coach, Phil Ryan, who was coached for 38 years at the time, said that you were so disciplined and you were never late. So we're learning a lot about you we're learning about your discipline, we're learning about your curiosity, that you were always into computers, you're always tinkering, and you end up in Stanford. What were your options? What did the world look like to you?
Okay, I just want to correct the record though.
Yes.
I think, people who go on to do big things, they project these, these auras that somehow, they're calendar is perfectly organized and they're never late. I am always late, just to be clear. Super disorganized. Every morning I have this existential dread, am I working on the right thing? Should I be spending more time on this thing? I actually think entrepreneurship is way more chaos than structure. People who spend all their time organizing everything perfectly, that's actually not the pattern for entrepreneurship. I'm beginning to believe that entrepreneurship is way more how many ideas can you try, how quickly, without running out of money, than it is actually about having this genius insight. Instagram was, I won't call it the end, but it was the end of a series of mistakes and bad product ideas and things that didn't work till we found that one that people really liked. And I look back on that and tell that story because I think so many people think, I don't know, these big companies that end up touching billions of users a day were created, because they had some master plan. But actually, it's all about iteration and understanding and searching for those problems that people have and solving them in a way. When we sat down to build Instagram.
It was Bourbon.
Yeah, it was Bourbon. It was a terrible check-in app. Check-in apps, I'm trying to think of today's example, but it's kind of like a chatbot today. Everyone has a chatbot, right? Back in the day, everyone had a check-in app, and we were trying to build a check-in app. And it turns out the check-in app we had built, Bourbon, bad name.
It's spelled funny.
Yeah, it was missing some values. It was very of the moment. Vowels, not values. That's going to come back to bite me.
I didn't ask a follow-up.
No, it's all good. The thing that it did, I think better than anything else, was it also allowed you to post a photo of what you were doing. So people were checking in at bars, and we were like, we should let you just post a photo. And here's the crazy thing, okay?
Yeah.
In order to post a photo, you had to send that photo from your iPhone to an email alias that was auto-generated for you. So mine was bacon15@gmail.com or something. It was some auto-generated thing. And everyone did it. Everyone who used Bourbon, all 100 of us, did it. But I was like, that's a sign. If people are willing to go through all these hoops just to do this one thing, and we were like, oh, okay. Mike and I sat down and we were like, cancel this part of the app, cancel this part of the app, all these things, focus on the photos. And the famous story is I'm walking on a beach with my now wife, Nicole. You'll figure out why she's my now wife. We're walking along the beach because I needed a break from building Bourbon, and we took a week and we went to this random city or town in Mexico, which is now very fancy, Todos Santos. It wasn't at the time. And we were walking along the beach, and I was like, Nicole, are you going to use this app that we're working on. It wasn't called Instagram yet. She's like, nope. It's like, come on, like, why
Honey,
not?
come
And
on,
she goes,
honey.
because my photos aren't good enough. Like, I know everyone's posting photos, but their photos are so good. And I was like, well, hon, it's just because everyone filters their photos. And she goes, well, you should probably add filters. And at that moment, I realized, yes, we should. So I went back to the little, it wasn't an Airbnb because that didn't exist at the time, but it was a bed and breakfast. And I looked up how to code filters. I added that. And to this day, if you go back on my profile, all the way back, first photo ever on Instagram is a little tiny stray dog in Mexico at a taco stand that we went to, filtered with X Pro 2, which was the filter that I made in the bedroom on vacation. And that made it take off in a way that I couldn't have imagined. Everyone wanted filters. Everyone wanted to post photos about where they were. But if you weren't willing to do all the experiments and all the failures up until that point, we never would have figured that out. Yeah. And it was all about iteration and just trying. But when you spot, it's almost like, you spot, I don't know, a fleck of gold in the ground, or you see a little oil coming out. You dig, and sometimes you find a huge well. And it's like when you find a huge well, you just hang on. Because the first 2 years of Instagram were basically just hanging on while the world decided to come on board. But it was, many, many years of trial and error to get to that point.
So I can imagine developing Instagram versus Artifact was a very different experience. There was one common element, though, I want to ask about first, and that's your partnership with your friend, Mike. What is the secret for being willing to do this with each other, not once, but twice, and all the work in between? It's extraordinary to me. This has got to be one of the great sort of founder love stories of all time. Like real friends.
It's very possible. So here's the thing. It wasn't just Mike. It was also Robbie, who I worked with as an associate at Google. I was an associate marketing manager. And I worked so was Robbie. And he ended up becoming the head of consumer product at Instagram. And Kong, who also worked with us at Instagram. We basically brought together this amazing crew of people we had worked with before. Here's one of the issues of doing that, though. Just because you like each other doesn't mean you're the right team necessarily for a startup. Sure. I would talk with Mike about this. Sometimes we would, remember the days of being able to stay up until 2 a.m. and work on a problem because none of us had kids. None of us had anything else to do other than to work on that product. And to some extent, why do great companies tend to get started by very young kids? It's not kids, but young people. It's partially because there's nothing else distracting you. And so you have the ability to maneuver, et cetera. So, a big thing while we were working together, all of us had kids. In fact, I want to say 4 or 5 of us had kids in our our families had kids during Artifact. It was so hard that you had to figure out how to be so focused on the things that mattered, because it just required a very different style of work. But honestly, Artifact working or not working had very little to do with the team and had most to do with the fact that just people don't read as much as they used to. But the thing that was awesome was getting that band back together and getting to work on that idea for some amount of time. And it's just, you can never go back in history and be the same people you were when you were 27 starting something, but it's fun to work with people who just have consistently high integrity, who are awesome to be around, who always have great ideas in the mix. And that was the group of people we got together this time.
I'm curious if the fact that you were so well established the second time around helped or hurt.
Hurt, for sure.
How did it hurt?
If we weren't well established, I think we would have built Artifact in, 3 months, put it out, raised, $250,000 or something, maybe not that low, but some small amount, tested it, been that's weird. Not that many people love to read. I mean, the people that, do you know what I mean? Yes. But instead we were we got to get the brand name correct. And then we would try to buy the domain and they would figure out who we were and they'd be 5 million, it's, so, all jokes aside about the domain, just the pressure for, I sometimes joke, I think it would have been way more effective.
Yeah.
had we just started out with the team and said, guys, who's got the worst idea? Pick that, launch it in like 2 weeks. Everyone's like, man, these Instagram guys, they got weird ideas. Had that failure, and then they're like, all right, we got that out of our system. Let's go like work on lots of ideas. Because what ends up happening is you hold back because you're like, well, what are people gonna think? Is this the right splashy thing, et cetera? And that was totally counterproductive. Yeah. But the problem is, there are a lot of books about how to be a first-time entrepreneur. There are not a lot of books on how to be a second-time entrepreneur. Yeah. And all the mistakes you made the first time, you don't make the second time, you just make a whole new set of mistakes the second time. Yeah. So that's humbling. You're not perfect. You're not, it's amazing that you can start something that touches over 1 billion people per day, and then the second time around, like not get anywhere even close. The world is this great truth teller. You're not special. Like maybe you're more talented than the average Joe, maybe you're more well-connected, but like the world is a great truth teller of whether or not you just solved a problem that person needs. Yeah. And if you don't, they're not gonna use it. So the great thing about entrepreneurship is that you can get back up, say, who cares? I mean, how many times did we launch something at Instagram that failed that you guys just don't know about because you're like, yeah, Instagram launched this weird feature back in the day. But when you're doing it as your company, the focus is on you. So in some ways, you just have to get over that hump. So I think it was definitely a negative.
Well, as you were talking, it sort of occurs to me that anybody who works in a big organization has entrepreneurial elements happening within that organization at various stages of failure and despair and humbling. Sometimes it's a first-time team, sometimes it's a more established team making newer and different mistakes. But it's harder to do all of that. Design is good at that. Design is multiple stakeholders, it's need finding, it's iteration. On paper, it's good at it, but it's really hard to do it within an organization that's doing many, many different things at once under the same umbrella. So I'm curious if you have a take on the kinds of leadership it takes, if you've got a bigger organization, to build a culture where the climate is all the things that you described, but the individual weather is helping what people need, and particularly for young talent, who is where the energy and where the juice is coming from, who can survive the experience without being exploited, or really find the benefit of where they can make a contribution and grow within a larger organization.
So it's hard. I kind of have an allergy to like big company experience. I'm being honest here. Like even running Instagram, some of the things we would do to like make an organization run at that scale, and we were only about 1,000 people, but maybe effectively we were like 3,000 if you count all the resources inside of Facebook. I'm making that number up, but we were bigger than 1,000 people.
That's real.
It feels like you just spend a lot of time on the extra, and the extra just being all this cruft. And what you really want to do is figure out how to like get as close to the stuff that you're trying to solve, the problems that you're trying to solve, and you're all on board trying to solve those things. So it's not like, oh my God, how many like t-shirts did we create for every launch and all the swag and like approving what swag was okay for this launch. Like it just drove me insane. I'm seeing lots of nods, by the way. Just reflecting back on all of you managers.
The whole slide's like, oh my God, the swag.
No, and I bring up swag because I think it's an easy thing, but like, how do you get your teams to be passionate about like making people super happy and not like, oh, did I just go from IC3 to IC4.5 or whatever it is now? Like that stuff matters, but it's like enormous trailing indicators of success. And how do you get, your team members to focus on actually nailing a product and being okay with failure? Because what ends up happening in all these leveling and offsites and all this stuff is people get super risk averse.
Yeah.
Super risk averse. And you want to have the space for failure. You want to have the space for crazy ideas. Because otherwise what you get is just like really safely designed buttons and systems, right? Like you're like, great, we got a system for that. Just plug in the system. And that's all fine and it needs to happen at a certain scale. but where's that raw entrepreneurial drive on your teams? And it usually comes from like those brand new team members that haven't been steeped in the really large organizations who still have a lot of spirit. How do you get that to breed on your team rather than be stamped out? And I don't have the answers because I didn't do it particularly well at Instagram. But I do have to say, of all the designers that were at Instagram, some of them now lead these amazing teams elsewhere. We've got people leading teams at OpenAI. We've got people, we have these people who have great creative spirit. And I think your job is to wake up. Actually, I'll tell a story. I met a guy who ran an athletic clothing / basically shoe company. And he said on his whiteboard in his office, he would write in huge letters, "Don't forget to sell shirts and shoes." Because the amount of other stuff that would happen that would take his focus off that thing. And I always remember that because I kind of want all of you to go back in your offices. I don't know what you sell, whether it's shirts and shoes or something, but write that down and just don't forget the core is that there are people out there that want your product. They don't care about your offsites. They don't care about your swag. They don't care about what chair you have in your office. What they care about is did you help them in their lives? And can you drive your team to care about those same things?
I don't know what they sell, but I know what software they use.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we move on to your vision of the future, because I'm very curious about it, you've given us lots of tantalizing hints too. I do want to acknowledge you for one thing at Instagram, which I think is an important part of your leadership legacy. You were focused on what people did want, the easily share photos, the filters, to have that kind of good experience, but you were also focused on what people didn't want. You're not responsible for the bad behavior of people on the internet and in the world, but you took responsibility for the kinds of bullying that happens on all social networks and in real life too. And I want to acknowledge you for that. It's a tough place out here. Can you talk to us a little bit about what those conversations were like? I think that we could make the case that you've been one of the most effective technology executives advocating for the safety on platforms that exist. And I appreciate that about you.
Thank you. Whether or not I deserve that accolade, I'll put that aside for a second. I will say that we were doing AI before it was cool. Okay?
I didn't expect you to say that.
No, so here's why I say this, because I went to this conference and someone from Google presented about how they were using AI at the time, this was again, before it was cool, to classify terrorism, all sorts of bad things on social media. But it was limited to small corners of social media that, not that it didn't matter, but it wasn't that big. But we had this huge product and I was like, wait, what if we looked at our problems and we trained some of this AI to do some of this stuff, detecting things like bullying, for instance. That's where we landed as the first application of this. Maybe, just maybe, we could make a platform that didn't suck, that wasn't full of hatred, that wasn't full of vitriol. So I went back to the team. I was like, we're using AI to rank the Explore page. Guys, could we use AI to detect bullying in comments? They're like, oh yeah, sure, totally. And I was like, all right, can we do this? And then 3 weeks later, we had a bullying classifier and we rolled it out, and all of a sudden, you started seeing in the metrics a lot less bullying on the platform. And we did this big story about it at the time. And again, this was before AI was super cool. But this was a fairly simple classifier that just looked at words and stuff. So now I can only imagine what they're using at Instagram. But that was the first time I really felt if you've got a platform that's that large and you can do things where the team goes, yeah, boss, and in 3 weeks you make a meaningful impact in terms of how many people are experiencing negative experiences on the platform, how cool is that? Most people hope to have something very big, and they work on really cool solutions that touch, I don't know, hundreds of people. The fact that we could touch hundreds of millions of people week 3, that's a super cool experience. But I think to this day, Instagram is, at least internally, very focused on kindness and very focused on the user experience. And that's just about, setting a tone as a leader early on, what matters to you and what you think your responsibility is, and that you're not this independent party that just sits there waiting for bad things to happen on the platform, and you put your hands up and you say, well, we're just the pipes. Like you built the thing, you're in some way responsible for moderating the thing, so like do your best. I think the flip side of this is that things can get so big
Right.
that of course things are going to fall through the cracks. You can't detect everything. You can't stop every instance of bullying. And that can be painful, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. So I'm very happy that we were some of the first people to focus on that. But now it's kind of like, of course you work on that as social media. Of course that's part of your playbook. But I guess where that gets started is where someone has an idea and the team goes, yeah, boss, let's try.
So you had mentioned in another interview that machine learning is a little bit like a dark art. Even if everything is terrible, you might as well put a positive spin on it. What does that mean for people who are, it's not just the sparkle button making things easier for you, who are really thinking about these big models, their impact on society, on their business, as on the spectrum from a disaster to an opportunity? How do we think about this going forward?
I will say, I saw that you sent over this quote early on, and I meant to ask you, I totally don't remember saying that second part, but I do remember saying that it was a dark art. No, it's totally fine. So I don't remember the context, but here's what I think I meant. It's a dark art in the sense that it's not like you're connecting pipes and you just like know A plus B equals C, and you have to train these things, and depending on what training data you put in, you get different results. And as you train, the results change, and it's not so, building blocks. It's more like smudging watercolor and paint around. That's the dark art part. And honestly, I have an enormous amount of respect for these companies that are now trying to figure out how to make these things behave and in a responsible way, because it's hard. But at least you put a positive spin on it, I think was more about the future with AI.
Right.
I think with any technology or advent of technology, there are going to be issues. There are going to be ramifications. The types of jobs will shift. Jobs will be lost. The question is not whether or not those things happen. The question is how you deal with them, whether you get ahead of them, what programs you have in place to make sure that bad things don't happen as you go through these enormous transitions. But I think we're there. I like the fact that these companies that are developing these technologies start by saying, hey, we're worried this technology is going to kill us all. The fact that we're starting there means that it's on people's minds. In social media, it was like, isn't posting photos great? Shouldn't we just create a town hall square where everyone says whatever they want, whenever they want? And then years later, we realized, maybe we should have some protections. I'm not speaking for myself, but there are other companies. And we get to this point, and I think we're now seeing with the AI revolution, companies have at least started with safety in mind. And I think that bodes well.
I want to ask about leadership too. Gosh, Kevin, I could talk to you all day. You are just such a delightful conversation partner. I really appreciate you.
Are we the first one this morning for you guys?
Yeah. How are we doing? Good?
We're good. It's all downhill from here. No.
I'm thinking
the next speaker is backstage being like, why would he say that?
No, I know. He's like a magician, right? I know. Look, I'm thinking about the world. This is a question where I'm thinking about the world. This is sort of like the philosopher, king, queen, leader, royalty hat here. The world needs so much now, and we're aware of it. There's really pressing needs. There's climate. There's conflict. There's all this stuff that is happening out there. And of course, it's this strange, crazy election year. I'm not asking a question about politics. I'm asking about human leadership.
I did not go to the Trump fundraiser, if that was your question. Yeah. I wasn't there.
Were you invited?
No.
That's it. That's the end of the Trump part of our talk. But people are asking CEOs and very senior leaders to show up differently, and that's going to mean something in the pipeline too, as people come of age. I know the big companies. Some people are going to be starting their companies, and their companies are going to grow. But business savvy is clearly an important part of it, but like the human part, the inclusive part, the empathetic part, the imaginative part, the part that does work through others, which is sort of like the basic definition of leadership, without bullying people or threatening them, and really being persuasive and bringing people along. So I'm curious, what skills do you see being important for future leaders to be successful? And how can we identify that in people around us as they rise up through the ranks?
I believe that it is impossible to live under a rock anymore. We are all so connected to everything happening at any given moment, overseas or domestically, that of course things that happen in the world are going to affect the workplace. You can't separate the two. It used to be easy. You'd show up at work, you'd be in your cubicle, and there's no scrolling TikTok. There's no what did so-and-so say on Twitter. Your daily life is being connected to what's happening in the world. And I think that how that affects the workplace, it can be both positive because we understand what's happening in the world and what affects our business, but it can also be distracting. It can be disheartening. So I think as a leader, you need to be aware you don't live in a bubble. You're not living under a rock. Didn't mean to bring up Trump and have that reaction. I apologize. But like the
it's fine. We can talk about him if you want.
It was interesting. Like when Trump won the first election, I was asked to give a speech in front of the entire company at Instagram, and I thought to myself, that's like a really interesting ask, because normally it's like, okay, it's an election. People have their beliefs, but I think that people are so tied to the outcome of what happens politically now that it's hard to not make it enter the workplace. And I mean, I remember, I did stand up in front of the company and we talked about what that election meant for our policies, our operations overseas, et cetera. Just like the things people were worried about. People were asking questions.
Like the Muslim ban.
It was a time to ask questions. But it was a moment where I realized, like, you really can't separate the two anymore. You can't just be a business and not worry about how these things are going to affect your business operationally. But even emotionally, like being able to get work done and stuff. But I guess my point there is you need to be aware that you can't just separate the human from the work as much as maybe they did in, I don't know, the 90s or something. And looking forward, I think as a leader, what you need to realize is that to get the best out of people, given that these people have infinite opportunity to go to any startup, to go to any other competitor, you need to create a place where they feel comfortable and they feel inspired. But I think the mistake that we make is we focus on swag and offsites and all this stuff, and we don't focus on giving people hard, interesting challenges. At the end of the day, like all people care about, I think, fulfillment-wise, is not being gifted, it's having the ability to be their best and solve amazing problems, and then like watching billions of people use that product. I mean, still to this day, I'll have conversations with people about how we designed the circle around stories on Instagram, or the close friends product, which now like the team tried to kill that 20 times in development, and now it's one of the most interesting parts of Instagram. Giving people the chance to take risks, develop products, and then let lots of people use them, that's what matters. And I think sometimes we get focused too much on the other.
I know that Artifact is safe and sound in its current iteration, but it seems like you're a little bit of an inventor in between inventions right now.
Totally. Not it seems, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you think about the future? How is your antenna looking in the future and thinking about what problems need to be solved, and how do you recommend that we think about the future too?
I realized very quickly that as much as I wear the costume of a business person, that is not me. Like, I loved running a large organization, and I loved all the business parts of it, and I loved building an ads product that generated billions in revenue and all that stuff. But like at its core, the thing that got me to do Instagram initially was behaving a bit more like an artist, which is to say, not clearly having a view of exactly what objective I want to accomplish, but rather getting to the truth of like what I care deeply about and tinkering and playing with things until something, hatches. And I think, there's a mistake you can make later on in your career is if you like forget actually who you are internally is much more of an artist and less of a business manager, then you can focus on the wrong things. So what I'm doing right now is very much focusing on exploring. And that's been super fun. I also have 2 kids, a 4 and a 6-year-old, and they are super fun yet humbling. And like who gets to take this time to be inspired? Like it's such a treat. It's amazing. I will say, who knows what happens in the future, meaning if it's another company, if it's a book, if it's like, I literally don't know. But that's part of what makes the creative process so alluring is you have no idea where it will head. And that's a good thing. So I'm not going to give you a BS answer that's like, in 2 months I'm launching an AI company. No. Like it's about exploring.
Are you?
No. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, well, I would buy your book.
I have nothing that I'm hiding. In some ways, not to go with the book thing, the creative process is about giving yourself the space to be inspired. And I have the amazing, I have the space to do that, which is great. Not many people do. And I wake up every day realizing how lucky I am to explore things. But I know we only have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. So what I want to say is if you take anything from today, like what I hope you do in your organization, your team, whatever you do next, is you're focusing on getting the real work done and realizing that like true enjoyment, true fulfillment comes out of building things for people. It brings a smile to their face because it solves something that's been a huge pain in their ass for such a long time. And it's not so much about the big company minutia layers of things that we all get caught up in. And if you can focus on that, I think you will find that both you and your teams wake up with much more excitement, much more vigor every single day. And most importantly, you will create better products.
That is a perfect place to end. Kevin, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Have a great Config.
That was amazing.